Slap. The sharp sound echoed through the packed courtroom like a thunderclap. Gasps filled the air. Phones dropped. One woman screamed. The white bailiff, Officer Ray Dugan, stood breathing heavy, his hand still midair from the blow he had just delivered. Before him stood an old black man, maybe in his 70s. Bald head, smooth, dark skin, a quiet strength in his posture. His only reaction? A slow, deliberate blink. "Don't you raise your voice in my courtroom, boy," the officer barked. But the courtroom had gone dead silent. Eyes moved from the old man to the stunned judge, to the frozen stenographer, to the reporters in the back row, their mouths hanging open. Even the prosecutor stood in disbelief, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. The old man's voice was calm, almost gentle. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Officer Dugan scoffed. "You think I'm scared of you, old man? You're just another street preacher running his mouth in court." Suddenly, a tall woman in a dark blue suit rushed forward from the crowd, flashing a federal badge. "Put your hands behind your back, Dugan." "Who the hell are you supposed to be?" he demanded, turning to face her. She looked him dead in the eye. "Special Agent Naomi Brooks, Joint Task Force on Domestic Terror. You just assaulted the most feared U.S. Army general alive, General Elijah Freeman." Everything stopped. Dugan's face drained of color. Gasps turned to stunned murmurs. Reporters scrambled for their phones. The judge stood frozen, mouth slightly open, as if time had broken. The old man, General Freeman, slowly lifted his head. "Now," he said, voice low and commanding, "let's talk about justice." 3 weeks earlier, in a quiet neighborhood in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the sun rose over an old white house with green shutters and a crooked mailbox. The American flag swayed gently on the porch. Inside, Elijah Freeman sat in his wooden chair, sipping his black coffee and reading the Times-Picayune. He wore the same gray sweater every morning and khaki slacks that had been pressed with Army precision. He didn't look like much, just an old man with a military buzz cut, still sharp despite the wrinkles. To most folks on the street, he was just Mr. Freeman, the quiet widower who walked with a cane and gave candy to neighborhood kids. No one knew he had once commanded thousands. No one knew about the scars under that sweater or the missions stamped with red ink locked in Pentagon vaults. To the children, he was the man who let them race through his yard and sometimes taught them how to shine their shoes. To adults, he was polite but distant. Still, everyone respected him. Everyone, except Officer Ray Dugan. Ray had only been transferred to the 9th Ward Precinct a month earlier, but he had already made a name for himself. Pulling over black teens for walking too slow, questioning mothers pushing strollers, issuing tickets for cracked windshields. Everyone in the neighborhood said the same thing. He's looking for trouble. And trouble found him. It started with a flyer. A young boy named Malik had been arrested for allegedly stealing from a corner store. No evidence, no witnesses, just Dugan saying he looked guilty. The boy's mother, Patrice, a nurse and single mom, came to Elijah Freeman's porch in tears. "I know you used to be someone," she said, wiping her face. "Please, just come speak at the hearing. They don't listen to us." At first, Elijah said no. His time was done. He had buried too many friends, survived too many wars. He didn't want to speak to people who never heard. But something about Patrice reminded him of his own daughter, gone too young. Something about the fire in her eyes when she said, "They're gonna ruin my boy's life," stuck with him. The next day, he pulled out his old uniform, creased and faded, but still whole. He ironed it. Then he folded it up and put it back in the drawer. He wasn't going to wear it. He was going to walk into that courtroom just like they saw him, an old, harmless black man. They wouldn't see him coming. The court date was set. The day before the hearing, Officer Dugan parked outside Elijah's house, rolled down his window, smirked. "You Freeman?" he asked. Elijah looked up from his rose bushes. "Depends who's asking. I heard you're going to run your mouth in court. Might be a bad idea for an old man." Elijah gave a small smile. "I've faced men twice your size and 3 times your evil. You don't scare me, son." Dugan stepped out of his car and stood over him. "You keep talking like that, and you might not make it to court." That was when Naomi Brooks showed up. Tall, sharp, dressed like she meant business. She was across the street, talking to someone at the bus stop. But her eyes were watching everything, and she never forgot a face. What she saw in Dugan's eyes that day made her blood run cold. Back inside his house, Elijah sat in the dark for a long time, holding a photo of his wife and daughter. His hands trembled. He wasn't afraid. He was remembering. Remembering the last time a man tried to intimidate him. Baghdad, 2006, a rooftop, blood on the walls, screams on the radio. A decision that saved 400 lives, but cost his best friend his leg. That was the last day he ever questioned whether he still had what it took. The morning of the hearing, Elijah wore a simple navy jacket, walked with his cane, slow, deliberate, every step a warning. Naomi Brooks was already there, seated in the back row. She was watching for something, or someone. Patrice sat beside her, holding Malik's hand. Her boy was shaking, scared out of his mind. "You don't have to be scared today," Elijah told him, kneeling slowly to his level. "Because today, you've got an army behind you." Malik looked confused. "But it's just you." Elijah winked. "Sometimes one soldier is enough." Courtroom 3B was packed. The judge was strict, but fair. The prosecutor was overconfident. The public defender seemed like he hadn't slept in a week. And then came Dugan. He strutted in, cocky as ever, gave Malik a smug look, nodded at the judge. When Elijah stood up to testify, Dugan didn't like it. Not one bit. He interrupted, objected, smirked, whispered things under his breath. Then Elijah raised his voice. Not a shout, not even a yell, just a voice filled with command. And that's when Dugan slapped him. Right there, in front of everyone. The crowd had barely reacted when Naomi Brooks stepped forward with her badge. "Put your hands behind your back, Dugan." And then came the silence. And the look on Dugan's face when he realized who he had just struck. Elijah's expression never changed. Calm, like a storm waiting behind steel eyes. The bailiff didn't know. The judge didn't know. Even Naomi didn't know how powerful the man in front of them truly was. But they were about to find out. Because outside the courtroom, something had already been set in motion. A phone call. A quiet alert sent up the chain. And deep in Washington, D.C., someone picked up a red phone and said only 2 words. "It's Freeman." Back in the courtroom, the judge's gavel hit the desk once. Twice. 3 times. "Order," she demanded. But there was no order anymore. And what came next would shake the entire country. Gasps still lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Officer Ray Dugan, now pale and visibly shaken, slowly turned to Naomi Brooks, whose badge glinted under the courtroom lights. "I didn't know," Dugan stammered. "He didn't say anything. He didn't tell us who he was." "That's the thing about real power," Naomi replied, stepping closer, her voice low and steady. "It doesn't need to shout." She snapped the cuffs onto his wrists. The room remained frozen, as if no one dared to move until they understood what they'd just witnessed. The bailiff who stood beside the judge looked like he'd seen a ghost. Reporters whispered into their phones, their voices urgent. The judge herself, stern and proper just minutes ago, now looked stunned, her eyes flicking to Elijah Freeman with growing uncertainty. Elijah hadn't moved. He didn't blink. He stared at Dugan the way a lion might look at a hyena that had gotten too close. Naomi glanced back at the courtroom door. "Clear the room. Now." Court officers scrambled to follow the order. People protested. Lawyers stood to argue. Reporters shouted. But Naomi raised her voice. "This room is under federal lockdown until further notice." And just like that, the room emptied. Everyone, except Elijah, Naomi, Malik, and his mother. Once the door clicked shut, Naomi let out a long breath. "Sir," she said, addressing Elijah not like a witness, but like a commanding officer. "Forgive me for stepping in without orders, but I wasn't going to let this man lay another finger on you." Elijah finally turned to face her. "You did good, Agent Brooks." Naomi's jaw tightened. "They don't know yet, do they?" "No," Elijah said quietly. "And I want to keep it that way for now." Patrice, still clutching her son, finally found her voice. "What's going on? Who is he really?" Elijah knelt once again, looking Malik in the eyes. "You'll be okay, I promise. But this hearing isn't about you anymore. Something bigger is happening now." Malik nodded slowly, not fully understanding, but trusting him anyway. And then, through the window, came the sound of helicopters. Low, loud, heavy. The sound of military-grade blades slicing through the Louisiana sky. Naomi's earpiece buzzed. She pressed a finger to it and nodded once. "They're here." Elijah stood, the cane in his right hand clicking softly against the floor. "Good," he said. "Let's go meet them." 6 days earlier, Naomi Brooks sat at a high-rise cafe in D.C., sipping lukewarm tea and watching the rain smear the skyline. She hadn't slept much. The threats had grown worse. The reports from Louisiana had become more disturbing by the hour. Wrongful arrests, planted evidence, and rising racial tensions in East Baton Rouge Parish. And one name kept coming up. Officer Ray Dugan. She'd started digging. Dugan had transferred from New Jersey after being cleared of multiple brutality complaints, all of them from Black or Latino men. He'd spent only 6 months in Newark before his personnel file disappeared, erased clean like it never existed. But Naomi was good at what she did. Very good. And she wasn't about to let another crooked officer go unchecked. Still, she wasn't expecting what she found. Buried in the latest complaint from Baton Rouge was a name she hadn't seen in years. Elijah Freeman. When she first saw it, she dropped her tablet. She remembered the name from her military training. Back at Quantico, they had called him the Phantom General. He led units into places even the CIA couldn't get intel from. Operated under so many code names, even top brass couldn't track him. His reputation was legend. Ruthless to his enemies. Loyal to his men. They said he once led a battalion through 72 hours of urban warfare without losing a single soldier. But he had disappeared more than a decade ago. No retirement ceremony. No public statement. Just vanished. Naomi had assumed he was dead. Until now. She didn't ask for permission. She booked a ticket to Louisiana and caught the next flight. She arrived just in time to see a white cop standing over an old black man in his garden. She knew before anyone told her. That wasn't just a man. That was General Elijah Freeman. And he was in danger. Back in Baton Rouge, Elijah walked slowly across the courtroom lobby, escorted by 2 heavily armed U.S. Marshals. Outside, the rotors of 2 helicopters churned the air, kicking up dust and drawing a crowd. The courthouse steps swarmed with press and curious bystanders. A long black SUV waited at the curb. Naomi walked just behind him, hand never far from her hip holster. "Sir, the Pentagon's been alerted. They want you flown out to Andrews immediately." "No," Elijah said firmly. "I'm not leaving Louisiana." Naomi stopped. "With all due respect." "I said no," he repeated. "This isn't war on foreign soil. It's happening right here. I didn't fight 3 wars overseas to run from this one at home." She hesitated, then nodded. "Then we bring the task force here." They entered the SUV and the doors slammed shut. Inside, it was quiet, almost too quiet. Elijah leaned back and looked out the tinted window at the crowd that had gathered. "They think they saw something shocking today," he murmured. "They haven't seen anything yet." Naomi pulled out a black case, opened it slowly, and inside lay a communication tablet, encrypted to Pentagon frequency. She slid it toward him. "Then let's show them." He stared at it, paused, then finally picked it up and entered the 6-digit code only a handful of people in the country knew. The screen lit up. "Access granted, General Elijah Freeman." A voice crackled over the speaker. "Sir." Standing by for instructions. Elijah glanced at Naomi. "We start with Dugan. He's in holding," she said. "The local PD wants to process him, but—" "No," Elijah said. "That's not justice. Not for what he's done. We're going to expose everything. And not just him. We're tearing the whole rotten tree out by the roots." He looked at Naomi. "You in?" She didn't hesitate. "All the way, sir." Outside, the crowd grew louder. Phones waved in the air. Reporters shoved mics at passing officers. And then, in the distance, a dark, unmarked vehicle pulled up. 3 men stepped out, wearing civilian clothes, but with military posture. Naomi recognized the insignia stitched into their belts. DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. One of them reached inside his jacket. And suddenly, bang. A single gunshot cracked the air. People screamed. Elijah ducked. Naomi drew her weapon and shouted, "Down!" The SUV's bulletproof windows absorbed the impact, but the windshield had cracked. And then Elijah's voice cut through the chaos. "They found us." Naomi's heart pounded. "What do we do?" Elijah's face was calm as ever. "We bring them war." The shot had barely faded before chaos exploded around the courthouse. Screams tore through the crowd. Police shouted for backup. Reporters hit the ground, shielding their cameras and gear. People scattered in every direction, some hiding behind cars, others diving for cover behind trees and benches. Inside the armored SUV, Naomi Brooks already had her Glock drawn, eyes scanning every movement beyond the cracked windshield. "That was a warning shot," she said, breathing fast but focused. Whoever they are, they're not amateurs. Elijah Freeman didn't flinch. His eyes narrowed, not from fear, but from the sharp clarity of someone who had stared down snipers on rooftops and walked through IED zones without blinking. He reached across the seat, opened a black case secured to the floor, and pulled out something that hadn't seen daylight in 10 years. A matte black satellite phone with a direct uplink to the Pentagon's Shadow Operations Command. Command, this is General Freeman. We have a hostile situation on the ground in Baton Rouge. Repeat, hostiles are armed and attempting interception. Request immediate Tier 1 assets for urban containment. The voice on the other end paused. General, you're requesting Tier 1 inside U.S. borders? Elijah's voice cut through the static like a blade. That's correct. This isn't just about a crooked cop. We're sitting on something deeper. The line went silent. Then came 2 words, confirmed. Rolling assets now. Outside the SUV, 2 of the men who had exited the unmarked vehicle were now pulling something from the trunk. A long black case that opened to reveal a compact rifle with a suppressor already mounted. Naomi saw it through the front windshield. They're about to make a move. Not if I do first, Elijah said. He reached for his cane, gripped the top, and with a quick twist, unsheathed a slim, steel baton hidden inside. They forgot I wrote the book on city warfare. Naomi gave a smirk despite the chaos. Sir, I didn't know your cane was packing. There's a lot they don't know. From the rearview mirror, Malik and his mother Patrice were still lying across the back seat, Patrice shielding her son with her body. Her eyes were wide with fear. Elijah, she said, voice trembling. Who are these people? Elijah didn't answer. Instead, he looked Naomi dead in the eye. We need to get them to safety. I have an extraction plan, Naomi said, pulling out a second phone. There's a secure facility 10 blocks from here. Underground garage. I can get us there in under 5 minutes if we move now. Do it, Elijah said. Backup's 10 minutes out. Then we move fast and hit first. Naomi slammed her palm on the driver's shoulder. Go now. The SUV's engine roared to life. The driver, a clean-cut Marine with nerves of steel, jerked the vehicle into reverse, then gunned it forward, swerving hard as bullets pinged off the back bumper. One round hit a side mirror, shattering it into a spiderweb of glass. Hold on, the driver shouted. They tore down the courthouse steps, straight through a barricade, and hit the street, weaving through panicked civilians. A second SUV followed behind, blacked out and heavily armed, part of Naomi's advance team. One of the attackers tried to block the street, stepping out with the rifle aimed. Before he could squeeze the trigger, Naomi leaned out the window and fired a single round into the engine block of his car. The vehicle stalled, and the shooter dove for cover. This isn't just some local militia, she growled. They've got serious training. Who the hell are they? Elijah's jaw clenched. Ghost Division. Naomi's blood ran cold. You think Dugan's connected to them? I don't think. I know. Elijah's eyes darkened. This goes all the way to the top. They turned down an alley, the SUV's tires screeching, fishtailing around a corner. Suddenly, boom. An explosion erupted behind them. One of the support vehicles was hit. The fireball lit up the sky. We're hit, the radio screamed. Naomi shouted, keep driving. Don't stop. They roared through another set of streets. Crowds blurred past. Sirens began to rise in the distance. 5 blocks away, the city still looked like any other warm afternoon. People walked their dogs. Music played from a food truck. But in the SUV, it felt like war. Garage entrance up ahead, the driver yelled. They swerved hard into an unmarked ramp and descended underground, the heavy door rolling shut behind them. Silence. Only the hum of fluorescent lights in the concrete garage. Naomi turned around. Everyone okay? Malik was crying, Patrice holding him close. Elijah reached across and placed a hand on her shoulder. You did good, he said. Her voice cracked. Are we safe now? Elijah gave a small nod, but his eyes were already scanning. For now. As the security gate slammed shut above, Naomi slid out of the SUV and motioned for Elijah to follow. We've got a safe room 2 floors down. No cell signals. No surveillance. Lead line walls. Only 3 people in the country know it exists. Elijah followed, walking slowly but deliberately. Not like a man running. Like a man choosing the battlefield. Once inside the secure room, the lights flickered on. Steel walls. A massive tactical screen. and a table in the center with maps spread across it. Naomi closed the door and pressed her palm to the scanner. "Talk to me," she said. "What is the Ghost Division doing here?" Elijah looked over the maps, then pointed to a red circle drawn around Baton Rouge. 10 years ago, he began. The Pentagon shut down an unsanctioned unit created during the War on Terror. Off-the-books soldiers. Mercenaries. Their job was to handle operations that were too illegal for the government to admit. Black Ops? Naomi asked. Worse. Domestic psyops. Voter suppression. False flag riots. They were building a shadow system, one that operated outside the Constitution. "And you shut them down," she said quietly. "I tried." He tapped a photo on the table, an old one. Grainy. Black and white. A young officer with cold eyes. Ray Dugan, Elijah said. He was one of them. Young. Eager. Easy to manipulate. Naomi stared. So this wasn't random. Him slapping you in that courtroom. It was a message. Exactly, Elijah said. They're not hiding anymore. Naomi looked toward the door, her hand resting near her sidearm. What do we do now? Elijah straightened. We pull every file, every connection, every name. We expose them from top to bottom. And then, Elijah stared at the maps. Then we take the fight to them. A buzzing sound came from the far wall, an emergency alert from Naomi's encrypted channel. She walked over, scanned the message, and froze. Her face went pale. What is it? Elijah asked. She turned slowly. They just released footage of the slap. Someone leaked it to the media. It's everywhere. Every screen in the country. Elijah didn't move. Naomi continued. They're saying you provoked it. That you threatened the officer. They're calling you a terrorist. Elijah's hands curled into fists. They're rewriting the story, she said softly. They're trying to turn you into the villain. Elijah stared at the screen, where his own face now flickered across live news broadcasts. Sharon's Reed. Breaking. Former military general assaults officer in courtroom. Shocking footage. Retired Army man threatens peace officer. And below it, the grainy, edited video. Cut to make Dugan look like the victim. They're trying to bury the truth, Naomi whispered. Elijah's voice was cold as steel. Then we dig it back up. Just then, the power flickered. The lights dimmed. Naomi spun toward the control panel. That's not right. This place is EMP shielded. And then, crack, boom. A section of the wall exploded inward. Concrete dust filled the air. Sparks rained from the ceiling. From the smoke emerged 4 figures in black tactical armor. No names. No insignias. Each carrying suppressed rifles. Elijah didn't wait. He grabbed the steel baton and charged. The room erupted into chaos. Dust choked the air. Sirens blared as emergency lights flickered red. Shadows danced against the steel walls, making it hard to tell how many enemies had breached. But Elijah didn't need to see clearly. His instincts kicked in, sharp as ever. In one swift motion, he closed the gap between himself and the first intruder, his baton slicing across the man's wrist, knocking the rifle clean out of his hands. The attacker didn't even have time to scream. Elijah grabbed his collar and slammed him headfirst into the metal table, the sound of bone cracking echoing through the room. Naomi was already firing. 3 sharp pops from her silenced Glock dropped the second attacker to the floor. But the remaining 2 moved fast, military fast. One ducked behind a column, spraying cover fire toward Naomi. The other rushed toward Patrice and Malik, who were crouched in the corner, frozen in fear. No, Naomi shouted, lunging across the room. Elijah beat her there. He shoved himself between the attacker and the family, his cane block catching the blade of a knife just inches from Malik's face. Elijah twisted, wrenched the knife away, and drove his elbow into the man's temple. The intruder crumpled. The last one turned and made a break for the breach in the wall. Naomi shouted, "Don't let him escape." Elijah launched his baton, clean, hard, and it struck the man square in the back of the knee. He stumbled, hitting the ground hard. Naomi was on him in seconds, slapping cuffs on his wrists and yanking off his helmet. The man was young, late 20s, blonde, pale skin, flushed with adrenaline and fear. No rank, no unit patch. Who sent you? Naomi barked. He stayed silent. She pressed her Glock to his temple. I will not ask again. His eyes were cold. You're already dead. You just don't know it yet. Before Naomi could react, he bit down hard, too hard. A crunch, and then foam spilled from his lips. Poison pill. Damn it, Naomi hissed, dropping him. Elijah crouched beside her, watching as the man convulsed briefly, then went still. This wasn't a hit, Elijah said quietly. It was a warning. Naomi stared at the smoking hole in the wall. Then what the hell happens when they stop warning us? Suddenly, Malik burst into tears. Patrice gathered him in her arms, whispering over and over, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. You're safe now. You're safe now." But she didn't believe her own words. Naomi stood and turned to Elijah. "Sir, we need to move. This place is burned." Elijah gave a firm nod. "We go to Fallback Protocol Delta." Naomi's eyes widened. "The one beneath the bayou? It's the only place they don't know about yet." They scrambled to pack quickly. Naomi pulled weapons, documents, and encrypted devices into a duffel bag. Elijah retrieved a black box from behind the wall, a biometric container sealed with his fingerprint and retina scan. Inside was a folder labeled Project Sandglass, Level Omega Clearance. Naomi glanced at it, then looked back at him. "You kept this." "I knew this day would come." Just as they prepared to leave, Naomi's secure comm buzzed. She put a finger to her ear. "Talk." A voice came through. "It's Mitchell. You've got a breach at your fallback site. Someone got there first. The place is compromised." Elijah's expression darkened. "They're cutting off every safe house," Naomi whispered. "Every line of defense. It's like they know your playbook." Elijah stepped toward her. "That's because they do. I trained half of these guys, and now they've turned it all against me." Patrice looked up, fear written across her face. "Then where do we go? What about Malik?" Elijah's voice dropped. "We go dark, completely off-grid." Naomi hesitated. "There's one place they'd never think to look. Not high-tech, not secure, but hidden." "Where?" She looked straight at Elijah. "Your old childhood home. The one they bulldozed." Elijah gave a ghost of a smile. "They thought they bulldozed it." Naomi nodded. "Then that's where we go," Elijah said. 2 hours later, they were in a beat-up 1996 Chevy Suburban heading west, rolling through the muddy backroads of Louisiana under cover of night. No GPS, no phones, no signals, just instinct and memory. Malik had fallen asleep on his mother's lap, worn out from the chaos. Patrice kept glancing out the windows, half expecting black SUVs to rise up from the darkness at any moment. "Why are they doing this?" she finally asked. "What do they want?" Elijah glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "It's not about what they want. It's about what they fear." "And what's that?" He was silent for a long time, then finally said, "The truth." "And what happens when people stop being afraid to speak it?" They drove for miles through marsh and brush until finally, the Suburban stopped in front of what looked like nothing more than a broken fence and a stretch of trees. "We're here," Elijah said. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "I don't see a house." "You will." He led them on foot through the woods, pushing past vines and swamp grass. After a few minutes, he stopped in front of a massive oak tree and reached into a hollow. A keypad, hidden by moss. He punched in a code. Click. A panel in the ground shifted, revealing a narrow stairwell. "Welcome to my real home," Elijah said. They descended into the underground bunker. It was simple: concrete walls, solar power, filtered water, old maps, cots. Everything a man might need to disappear. Malik stirred and opened his eyes. "Where are we?" Elijah knelt. "We're somewhere they can't find us. Somewhere you're safe." "Is this your house?" "In a way. I built it when I realized the government might turn on its own someday." Malik blinked. "Why would they do that?" Elijah sighed. "Because when you speak truth too loud, they call it treason." The boy looked confused but nodded anyway. Elijah stood and turned to Naomi. "I need time to gather what we have left. Documents, records, proof, everything they've buried." Naomi nodded. "We'll sort through it tonight." Just as she said that, her phone, her backup analog satellite phone, supposed to be disconnected, buzzed. She stared at it. No signal, but a message blinked. "Found you." She held it up to Elijah. "Sir, they breached the signal net. They know." Elijah took the phone. Then came the sound. A high-pitched whine. Not a car. Not a chopper. A drone. And it was descending fast. Naomi ran to the entrance. "We have to move now." But it was too late. Boom. A small explosive dropped onto the surface above, shaking the bunker, sending dust raining down. Malik screamed. Patrice threw herself over him. And Elijah? He just stood there, silent, watching, listening. Then he said 2 words. They're coming. The ground trembled under their feet. The shockwave of the drone blast had cracked the ceiling, sending small chunks of concrete crashing to the floor. The lights flickered and then plunged the underground bunker into darkness. A silence followed, a thick, tense silence, broken only by the soft, frightened breathing of Malik and his mother. Then, slowly, the red emergency backup lights buzzed to life, painting everything in a deep crimson glow. Naomi rushed to the panel near the hidden entrance. "We've got a breach," she said, fingers dancing across the manual override. "We knew it wouldn't last," Elijah said calmly. He reached under the cot and pulled out an old but well-kept M4 rifle and a spare mag. "We hold them off long enough for you to get the kid and his mother out." Naomi snapped around. "I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are," he replied, inserting the mag and slamming the bolt forward. "I need someone to keep them alive. If they take me, I can slow them down. But if they get Malik, it's over." Patrice clutched her son tighter. "Elijah, please, don't do this." But Elijah just gave her a soft smile. "I've been preparing for this since the day I left the battlefield. The difference now? I have something real to fight for again." Naomi's voice cracked. "We don't even know how many are up there." "That's the point," he said. "They think we'll panic. We don't." A loud clanging echoed above. The steel hatch to the surface was being pried open. Naomi yanked open a floor panel near the back of the bunker, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel. "Secondary escape route," she said, her voice tight. "Comes out 2 miles west, behind an old swamp church." Elijah nodded, then bent down to Malik. "You listen to Miss Naomi now," he said. "You don't look back, no matter what you hear." Malik's lip quivered. "Are you coming?" Elijah paused, then placed a hand on the boy's head. "I'll always be with you. I promise." Naomi gently pulled Patrice and Malik toward the tunnel. Just then, thud, the steel hatch above blasted open, and boots dropped down. Elijah turned and raised the M4. The red light caught on his eyes that had seen too much, but never backed down. "Go," he shouted. Naomi shoved the tunnel door shut behind them. And then it happened. The first 2 masked intruders dropped into the bunker, rifles up, but Elijah was already moving. He fired twice, 2 headshots, clean and fast, then rolled behind the cot as more dropped in, firing in bursts. Bullets ripped through the air. Elijah dove behind the steel table, flipping it up for cover. A voice called out from above. "General Elijah Freeman." It boomed through a voice amplifier. "You are hereby ordered to surrender. This facility is surrounded. You cannot escape." Elijah reloaded, heart pounding, sweat on his brow. But his voice was steady. "Yeah," he shouted back. "Then come and get me." 2 miles away, Naomi burst out of the tunnel exit with Patrice and Malik behind her. The air was thick with humidity, and frogs croaked in the distance. The abandoned swamp church ahead loomed like a ghost. White paint chipped, windows shattered, the bell tower leaning sideways. They ran for it. Inside, Naomi locked the back doors and scanned the room. Pews covered in moss, dust floating in the moonlight, and at the front, an altar, beneath which was a trapdoor. She flung it open. "Down there," she told Patrice. "You'll be safe." Patrice hesitated. "What about Elijah?" "We don't have time, go." They disappeared into the hiding space. Naomi turned back toward the door. Then she heard it. A rustle. Someone was inside the church. She raised her Glock, sweeping the beam of her flashlight across the shadowed pews. "Come out slow," she said, heart racing. "Hands where I can see them." A figure stepped from the shadows. Not in combat gear, just a suit. A man. Tall. Smooth. He smiled. "Well," he said, "I've been looking for you." Naomi narrowed her eyes. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head. "I work for people very interested in keeping the past quiet." He stepped closer. Naomi tightened her grip on her weapon. "You take one more step." The man raised his hands. "Relax. I didn't come here to shoot you." "Then why are you here?" He smiled wider. "Because I want to help you." She blinked. "Help us." Let's just say some of us inside the system aren't too happy about what's happening either. And Elijah Freeman's not the only one who knows what the Ghost Division buried. Naomi lowered her weapon slightly. "Who are you?" The man glanced around, then leaned in. "I'm the one who leaked the courtroom footage," he whispered. Naomi froze. "You what?" "You heard me. The slap. I released the full, uncut version. The real one. before they could edit it. Naomi's blood ran cold. But, if that's true, it's already out there, he said. The real video. The truth. It went live 20 minutes ago on 6 private networks. By morning, every screen in America will have seen it. Naomi's heart pounded. Then Elijah? He doesn't know. The man nodded. And he's holding the line while the world finally sees what they've tried to hide. Naomi stepped forward. Why would you help us? He looked down for a moment, then met her eyes. Because 20 years ago, Elijah Freeman saved my life in Kandahar. He pulled me from a burning Humvee with bullets flying overhead. Never even asked for a thank you. And when I came home, I watched them strip his name from every file, every medal, like he was never there. Naomi stared. I owed him. And now I'm collecting that debt. Just then, Naomi's comm buzzed. It was a scrambled frequency. She pressed a button. Static. Then, Elijah, compromised, fall back, perimeter breach. The signal died. Naomi looked at the man. How do we get back to him? You don't, he said. What do you mean? Because they've got drones surrounding the whole sector. And they just activated a cleanup protocol. Naomi narrowed her eyes. What kind of protocol? The man's face turned grim. They're going to make it look like Elijah Freeman never existed. The words hung heavy in the air. They're going to make it look like Elijah Freeman never existed. Naomi felt her knees wobble. Her hand gripped the edge of the altar as she stared at the man. That's not possible. You just said you leaked the footage. They can erase a leak, he interrupted. They can rewrite the narrative, flood it with fake versions, paint it as AI generated. The truth's out there, yes, but it's only a matter of hours before they drown it in lies. Naomi's breathing quickened. Then we have to stop them. The man, Agent Kyle Bennett, as he finally introduced himself, shook his head. We don't have time to play defense. We have to go nuclear. Naomi frowned. What does that even mean? Kyle pulled a folded sheet of paper from his jacket. It looked ordinary, yellowed, a little torn at the edges. But Naomi recognized the markings. That's classified protocol paper, she said. Pentagon issue. Kyle nodded. Level 0. Signed in '99. Never meant to see daylight. Naomi looked at him, stunned. How do you have that? Because Elijah wasn't the only one who didn't trust the government. He handed it to her. As Naomi unfolded it, her eyes scanned the top line. Project Sandglass, Black Phoenix Directive. Her blood went cold. No, she whispered. This doesn't exist. It was a myth. Not anymore, Kyle said. The people Elijah went up against weren't just rogue agents or deep state cowboys. They were the architects of the Black Phoenix Directive. She read aloud. If a decorated soldier becomes a threat to the continuity of government operations, he is to be disavowed, detained, or destroyed, using all available force. Her eyes darted back to Kyle's. So this was always going to happen. He nodded. They were always going to come for him. The moment he stood up, spoke out, he triggered the directive. Naomi sat down hard on a broken pew. He's buying us time, and we're sitting here in an old church with ghosts. Kyle knelt beside her. No, we're in the only place that still has a secret line to a forgotten relay tower. He pointed to the rotting steeple above. That tower was once used to transmit encrypted coordinates during the Cold War. No one's used it in decades. No one's watching it. Naomi stood, adrenaline returning. Can it still send? I've already rewired it. We send the right code to the right people, and we bring the entire Black Phoenix Directive into the light. Naomi looked at him. What's the code? Kyle smiled. Elijah gave it to me years ago. Told me to only use it if they ever turned on him. He pulled a small USB drive from a hidden slot in his belt. Naomi stared at it like it was a live grenade. And who does this go to? She asked. Media, senators, international allies, and one woman, whose son Elijah saved in Iraq. She's a major now. Military intelligence. Naomi looked back toward the trapdoor, where Patrice and Malik waited. Then back at Kyle. Then let's do it. Back at the bunker, Elijah was bleeding. A grazing shot to the shoulder had soaked his sleeve in red. Smoke filled the air, and broken bodies lay at his feet. 6 down, 2 wounded, more coming. He was running out of ammo. He knew it. They knew it. Above him, the voice returned. Last chance, Freeman. Come out, and you won't suffer. Elijah coughed and laughed weakly. I've lived through Fallujah, he shouted. You really think I'm afraid of you? Another explosion rocked the wall, sending sparks flying. One of the support beams cracked. Elijah ducked behind a desk, dragging a wounded intruder with him. The man gasped, gripping his leg. "You're fighting the wrong people," Elijah growled. The man shook his head. "You're the one who forgot his place." Elijah stared at him. "I never forgot. I just outgrew your cage." Then he dragged the man's comm unit off his shoulder and rewired it with a switchblade from his belt. "If I go down," Elijah whispered, "I'm taking every lie you built with me." The comm crackled to life. "Scramble all units. Freeman is still alive. Repeat, terminate with prejudice." Elijah closed his eyes for a moment, then pressed a button on the stolen unit. "Let's see how you like your own voice being heard." With a single push, the comm unit began transmitting on open frequencies. Everything, every word. The voice of his executioners, clear and traceable. He tucked it into a crack in the wall and braced himself. The final assault was coming, and he had 3 bullets left. At the old church, Kyle connected the USB drive into a rusted panel beneath the altar. Wires sparked. A tiny green light blinked. Naomi stood watch, Glock ready. Kyle typed furiously. "Encrypting now. 40 seconds till upload." Suddenly, crash. The side door exploded inward. 3 agents in tactical gear stormed in. Naomi dropped the first with a double tap. Kyle ducked as bullets tore through the wooden pews. The second agent raised a shotgun, but before he could fire, Naomi sprinted forward and launched herself over the pew, driving her elbow into his throat. He went down hard. The third raised his rifle at Kyle. Naomi spun and fired. Click. Empty. But just as the agent pulled his trigger, boom, the back wall erupted. A black truck came roaring through it like a beast. Behind the wheel, Patrice, eyes wide, fists tight on the steering wheel. She rammed the agent straight into the wall, pinning him with a sickening crunch. Kyle stared in disbelief. Patrice screamed, "Get in." Naomi yanked Kyle from the altar. "Is the upload done?" "Just hit 100%. Then let's move." They piled into the truck. Malik was in the back seat, eyes wide, gripping the dashboard like it was a lifeline. Patrice floored it. Behind them, flames lit up the church as the hidden server finally fried from overload. Naomi turned to Kyle. "Did the upload have a trace?" He nodded. "A video. A live feed of Elijah. The audio of their orders. Everything." Naomi clenched her fists. "Then it's only a matter of time." Kyle's voice was grim. "They'll come faster now? Harder." Naomi looked back toward the forest, toward where Elijah was still fighting. "No," she said. "We're going to them." Kyle blinked. "What? You said they'll erase him, right?" Naomi said, her voice ice. "Not if we bring the world to his doorstep first." She pulled out a second device. It was a flare beacon. High altitude. Encrypted. A signal for eyes in the sky. She activated it and tossed it out the window. Overhead, satellites would catch it. News drones. Civilian channels. Government watch lists. They were watching now, and Elijah Freeman was about to be seen. By everyone. Back at the bunker, Elijah stood, weak but still tall, facing the doorway as the final team approached. The leader stepped in. A black uniform. Visor. Rifle raised. "Time's up, General." Elijah smiled through the blood. "Then let's make this moment count." The soldier in the black uniform raised his weapon. Elijah didn't flinch. A single spotlight from the surface poured down the open hatch, catching the blood, smoke, and dust that coated the bunker like the aftermath of a war. Elijah stood in its center, his M4 rifle aimed low, near empty. His shirt was soaked in red, his shoulder aching with every breath. But his eyes, those cold, sharp, unwavering eyes, burned like fire. The soldier's voice was mechanical through his comm mask. "Drop the weapon." Elijah shifted his weight just slightly. "You first." More boots hit the floor around him. 6 soldiers now, each dressed in black, each pointing rifles at his chest. The lead one took a step forward. "By order of the Black Phoenix Directive, you are to be detained indefinitely for crimes against the security of the state." Elijah's laugh was low and bitter. "You boys love fancy names for murder." Last warning. Elijah turned his head toward a corner of the bunker, where the hidden comm unit he'd rewired blinked softly. The audio was still transmitting, still live. He looked back at the soldiers. "Yeah," he said. "Here's mine." He lifted the rifle and pulled the trigger. The gun barked once, twice, then clicked. Empty. Elijah dropped to one knee as the soldiers opened fire. But it wasn't bullets that came next. It was silence. From the ceiling hatch, a new voice thundered down. Stand down. Cease fire. This is a secure operation under civilian oversight. All 6 black uniformed soldiers froze, rifles half-raised, eyes darting upward. Then a second spotlight hit the room, brighter, colder, and a rope ladder dropped from the ceiling. A figure descended quickly. Tall. Female. Dressed in tactical gray with a U.S. flag patch and a gold intelligence badge on her chest. She landed with grace and authority, her boots slamming into the concrete like a gavel. She raised her voice. Anyone who fires again will be answering to the Senate Armed Services Committee by morning. The soldiers hesitated. Who are you? The lead one asked. She stepped forward, flashing her badge. Major Christina Reynolds. Military Intelligence, Internal Affairs. You are all under direct investigation for unsanctioned enforcement of Project Sandglass. Elijah blinked, still kneeling, pain twisting his face. Reynolds. She looked at him, softer now. Hello, General. Then she turned to the soldiers, her voice going hard again. Weapons down. Now. One by one, the black-clad soldiers dropped their rifles. A wave of dizziness hit Elijah, and he almost fell, but Reynolds was beside him in an instant, catching his arm and supporting his weight. You came, he said hoarsely. She nodded. I saw the broadcast. I recognized your voice. He tried to smile, but winced. They tried to erase me. And now the world knows, she replied. You're not going anywhere but home. As she helped him toward the rope ladder, Elijah glanced around the shattered bunker. His safe house, his last line of defense, was done, but something deep inside him stirred. A flicker of peace, the beginning of something new. Above ground, as they reached the surface, the true scale of the fallout became clear. News drones hovered high in the sky. Spotlights lit up the trees. Dozens of reporters had gathered outside the blast perimeter, yelling questions, cameras rolling, live streams climbing into the millions. And behind a cordon of military vehicles stood Patrice, Malik, Naomi, and Kyle, flanked by agents from both civilian and military oversight branches. Malik broke free from a security officer and sprinted across the dirt. Elijah barely had time to brace before the boy tackled him with a hug. He let out a grunt, but the pain didn't matter. Malik held him tightly. You're alive, he whispered. Elijah knelt down, one knee trembling. Yeah, little man. I'm alive. Patrice rushed over, tears in her eyes, and Naomi wasn't far behind. They embraced like family long divided. But the reunion was cut short. From the side, a black SUV pulled up. 2 men stepped out, suits, grim faces. One of them raised his voice. Elijah Freeman. We have orders to remand you into federal custody for questioning. The crowd quieted. The moment froze. Patrice's hand tightened around Elijah's. But before anyone else could speak, Major Reynolds stepped forward. By whose orders? The man didn't blink. Department of National Security. Black Phoenix Division. Naomi laughed bitterly. That directive is exposed. You can't hide behind it anymore. We don't recognize the source of the leak as official, the agent said. Until a congressional review clears it, we are authorized to detain. But another voice rose from the crowd. Senator Alicia Thomas, flanked by her security team, pushed forward through the reporters. I think that's enough, she said, holding up her phone. I've just watched the footage, and I've got a full congressional panel on emergency call. She turned to the crowd. This man, she said, pointing at Elijah, is a decorated war hero. And for the last 24 hours, he's been hunted like a criminal while exposing one of the darkest government secrets of our generation. She turned back to the agents. Touch him, and you'll be facing more cameras than you can count. The agents hesitated, then backed off. Cheers erupted from the reporters, from the civilians nearby. Patrice sobbed quietly. Naomi looked up at the sky in disbelief. Elijah simply stood tall again, shoulders squared. But he wasn't smiling. Not yet. Because he knew it wasn't over. Not really. This was just the explosion. But the fallout hadn't begun. Later that night, in a secure facility deep beneath D.C., 3 men watched the footage on a secure loop. The slap, the trial, the uncut audio, and the voice of Elijah Freeman calling out their names. One of the men, gray-haired and bitter, leaned back in his chair. They'll make him a symbol. The second nodded. And symbols become movements. The third man, younger, more surgical in his thinking, whispered, then we cut off the movement before it grows. He turned the screen off. Find every connection, every ally, every echo of his message. Erase it. He looked up at the others. Elijah Freeman won the battle. He narrowed his eyes. But the war starts now. 3 days later, the world had changed. The footage of Elijah Freeman's slap, his brutal takedown, and his stand in the bunker had gone viral. Every news station in America, and several abroad, looped the same haunting audio. If I go down, I'm taking every lie you built with me. That line became a symbol. Protests erupted in dozens of cities. People chanted his name. Artists painted murals of Elijah with his hand raised, not in violence, but in resistance. Some called him a hero, others, a traitor. But one thing was clear. They couldn't ignore him anymore. In a modest hospital in Maryland, hidden behind a secure military wing, Elijah Freeman lay in a white bed, hooked up to IVs. His shoulder was wrapped in gauze. His ribs ached with every breath. But he was alive, and more dangerous than ever. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the occasional tap of boots from the guard outside. Naomi sat beside him, flipping through the hundreds of messages they'd received in the last 48 hours. People are calling for congressional hearings, she said. There's a petition with over 2 million signatures to repeal the directive. Elijah didn't answer. He stared ahead, eyes dark and quiet. Naomi set the tablet down. You okay? He finally spoke. I spent 30 years fighting wars in other people's countries. Never thought I'd come home and be the enemy in my own. Naomi's voice softened. You're not the enemy. Not anymore. He looked at her. You really believe that? Before she could answer, the door opened. Kyle walked in, carrying a manila folder. Elijah, he said, we've got a bigger problem. Naomi stood. What now? Kyle dropped the folder on the tray. Inside were satellite photos, news clippings, and a dossier marked classified in bold red. The Black Phoenix Directive was just a shadow. But now the people behind it are trying to light the whole damn world on fire. He flipped the folder open, revealing images of burning field offices, hacked databases, and wiped servers. Everything connected to Elijah's records gone. Military commendations, deployment files, clearance levels. They're trying to erase him again. Not with guns this time, but with silence. Elijah sat up straighter. They're doing a full ghost wipe. Kyle nodded. And not just you. Every soldier who stood up. Every officer who questioned the system. Naomi's jaw tightened. We have to stop it. Kyle looked at Elijah. There's one last place they can't reach. A vault in Nevada, deep desert, off the books. It holds backups of classified intel, including Project Sandglass. Naomi frowned. Why didn't you mention this before? Because it's suicidal to go there, Kyle said. It's buried beneath an old training base. Heavily guarded. Full of surveillance. If we go, we won't sneak in, we'll fight our way in. Elijah's voice was flat. Then we suit up. Naomi blinked. You can't even lift your arm right now. I don't need to, he said, pushing the covers back. I just need to stand long enough to make them afraid again. That night, in a safe house on the outskirts of D.C., Patrice sat on the couch, clutching a framed photo. It was old, Elijah in uniform, smiling, a younger Malik on his shoulders. Malik sat beside her, watching cartoons with the volume turned down. He turned to her. Mom. She smiled weakly. Yeah, baby. Are they going to kill Grandpa again? The question hit her like a punch. No, she said, voice trembling. No, they're not. He leaned his head on her shoulder. Can I come with you guys when you go? She pulled him close. Not this time. You need to stay safe. He looked up at her. But I'm brave like Grandpa. She kissed the top of his head. I know you are. That's why I need you to stay brave here. Outside, a van pulled up. Naomi stepped out and knocked. Patrice opened the door. We're going, Naomi said. Nevada. Patrice didn't hesitate. Then so am I. 2 days later, a black SUV roared through the desert, kicking up a storm of dust behind it. Inside were Elijah, Naomi, Kyle, and Patrice, armed and armored. The heat shimmered on the horizon as they approached the base. Fort Ashburn, officially decommissioned. Unofficially, very much alive. A high-security compound with underground vaults, radar jammers, and 24 guards dressed in black, just like the ones who had tried to kill Elijah. Kyle pointed to the satellite map on his tablet. There's an access tunnel through the old munitions yard. Leads straight to the vault. But there's motion sensors and a biometric lock. Patrice raised an eyebrow. You got a plan for that? He grinned. Yeah. Let Elijah walk through the front door. Everyone turned to him. I'm not joking, Kyle said. They're trying to erase him. They won't expect him to show up in person. It's like a ghost walking into his own grave. Naomi looked at Elijah. You sure? He opened the car door. Let's give them a reason to be scared of ghosts. The base was quiet at first. Too quiet. Elijah walked slowly toward the front gates, his steps deliberate, posture tall despite the pain. A camera turned toward him, then another. Inside the compound, alarms started blinking red. And then a voice boomed through a loudspeaker. You are trespassing on a restricted facility. Turn around. Elijah kept walking. I said. He stopped 20 feet from the gate, raised both arms slowly, then shouted, My name is General Elijah Freeman. You tried to erase me, but I'm still here. Behind him, Naomi, Patrice, and Kyle were already moving, flanking the east perimeter, slipping through the munitions yard. A soldier on the watchtower peered through binoculars and lowered his weapon. He turned to the comms officer. Sir, it's really him. Inside the command center, a man in a white dress shirt stood frozen. Colonel Matthew Grayson, one of the architects of Project Sandglass. He stared at the screen as Elijah stared back through the cameras. Grayson's hand trembled. Deploy the kill teams, he said coldly. Now. Gunfire exploded through the yard. Kyle ducked behind a rusted shell of a tank. We've got company. Naomi returned fire, dropping 2 guards near the fence. Patrice moved like a shadow, silent, lethal, her Glock barking as they advanced toward the access tunnel. Inside the base, Grayson watched in fury. Cut the feeds. Jam their signals. Burn the vault if you have to. Elijah heard the words through the open comm channel in his ear. He smiled bitterly. They're scared. Kyle's voice came through. We've reached the tunnel. 10 minutes to the vault. But suddenly, boom, the side of the munitions yard erupted. A tank rolled into view, fully operational. And behind it, a dozen black-clad soldiers. Kyle cursed. We've been made. Naomi shouted over the comms. Elijah, they're sending the firestorm. And Elijah just closed his eyes, then turned and ran straight into the base. Toward the tank, toward the soldiers, toward everything. The camera followed him as he charged. Inside the vault, a red warning light flashed. Unauthorized breach detected. Self-destruct protocol armed. Naomi screamed into the comm. Eli, stop. But Elijah didn't. He had one last move left. One last stand to make. And as he burst through the bunker door, straight into the storm, the blast slammed Elijah into the concrete wall like a wrecking ball. He hit the ground hard. The wind knocked clean from his lungs. His ears rang. Fire danced through the corridor behind him. Pieces of ceiling crashed down like rain. The whole base shook. But somehow he got up. Slowly. Bleeding. Burned. Furious. Behind him, the self-destruct countdown still echoed from the speakers. T-5 minutes until detonation. The vault ahead was just 20 yards away. A thick titanium door sealed tight. And somewhere inside were the classified files that could unravel the entire Black Phoenix directive. He limped forward. One step, then another. And behind him, echoing in the smoke, came the thunder of boots. They were coming for him. Outside the base, Naomi, Kyle, and Patrice huddled behind a blown-out blast wall. We need to get to him, Naomi shouted. Kyle checked the remaining charges on his belt. We'll never make it through the front. They've locked the outer corridors. I'm not leaving him, Patrice growled. She stood and ducked low, sprinting toward a ventilation shaft half buried under rubble. Naomi ran after her. Wait, what are you doing? There's a crawl system under the west wing, Patrice yelled back. It was in the old schematics. If we can reach it, we'll come out near the vault. Kyle groaned. You're insane. Yeah, she muttered. So was he. The 3 of them vanished into the shaft as bullets cracked over their heads. Elijah reached the vault door. A retina scanner blinked red. Access denied. He stared at it. This was it. No more passwords. No more escape plans. No more time. He leaned close. I'm not supposed to exist anymore, right? He looked into the scanner with one good eye. But you forgot something. Unrecognized biometric input. I built this system. He reached into his tactical vest and pulled out a small black cube, burned on one side. An override key. Something only a handful of people in the world knew existed. And he had been the one who designed it. He slammed it into the console. A blue light blinked once. Override accepted. The vault door began to hiss open. He took a breath. Then another. and walked inside. Rows of data servers hummed in the freezing air. Filing cabinets with old-world paper files lined the walls. Microchips, disks, classified drives. Everything the government thought was buried forever. Elijah moved fast, blood dripping from his temple, his jacket scorched. He found the Project Sandglass file first. Inside, photographs, recorded memos, mission logs, and names. Dozens of names. Some still alive. Some killed. Some erased like him. He grabbed the entire file, yanked out a hard drive, and jammed it into the side port of a mobile relay transmitter strapped to his chest. It beeped once. Uploading. Outside, Grayson watched the vault feed from his secure control room, eyes widening. "Shut it down," he barked. "Scramble the relay." A tech officer turned. "Sir, he's bouncing the signal through 3 satellite ghosts. We can't touch it." Grayson's face twisted. "Then bury him." He slammed his fist on the emergency trigger, initiating core overload. 2 minutes to full detonation. Patrice's voice came through Elijah's earpiece. "We're coming in from the west shaft, 30 seconds out." Elijah didn't reply. He was still staring at the screen, still watching the upload climb. 42%, 56%, 71%. If it hit 100%, it would stream the entire Sandglass archive to secured civilian news servers, whistleblower platforms, and 2 international watchdog agencies. Everything they tried to erase would become public. "Come on," he whispered. The ground trembled. The lights flickered. 87%, 93%, 99%. Upload complete. Elijah exhaled, then turned toward the vault exit. Just as the firestorm reached the door, Patrice burst out of the west corridor seconds later, gun in hand. "Elijah!" Smoke poured out of the vault. Alarms wailed. She ran straight into the flames and nearly tripped over him. Elijah lay against the far wall, coughing, burned, but alive. He grinned at her weakly. "You're late." She knelt beside him, tears streaming. "I thought you. I'm too damn stubborn to die." Kyle and Naomi pulled him up, each slinging one of his arms over their shoulders. "Let's move," Kyle barked. The 4 of them staggered out of the collapsing base just as the final blast ripped through the mountain. A massive plume of fire and dirt exploded into the air, lighting up the desert night. From the dunes above, cameras captured it all. And seconds later, every server, every platform, every broadcast in America lit up with the full upload. Project Sandglass, Black Phoenix, and General Elijah Freeman's full testimony. The next morning, the country woke up to war crimes on their screens. Talk shows were hijacked. Politicians panicked. Protesters gathered in front of government buildings holding signs that read, "We believe Elijah. You can't erase U.S." From court to courage. The White House issued a statement of grave concern. And deep beneath the Capitol, a closed-door meeting of intelligence leaders erupted into chaos. "They've destroyed the archive," one of them shouted. "Everything's out now." Grayson stood in silence until a younger agent entered the room with a clipboard. "Sir," he said, "there's another issue." "What now?" The agent looked nervous. "They're calling for a full military tribunal, and Elijah Freeman is being summoned to testify." The room went silent, and Grayson, the man who had tried to erase Elijah once and for all, finally looked afraid. In a quiet hospital in Nevada, Elijah sat by a window, a blanket over his shoulders. The nurse had just left. The room smelled like antiseptic and mint tea. Naomi entered with a laptop in her hands. "You might want to see this." He took it. On the screen, headlines. Elijah Freeman's upload hits 150 million views in 24 hours. Congress to open full hearings into secret directive. Black Phoenix agents facing federal charges. He smiled faintly. Then his eyes fell on another article. Charges dropped against black veteran slapped in court. Arresting officer suspended. DOJ investigation underway. He stared at it for a long time, then closed the laptop. Naomi sat beside him. "It's not over yet, but it's starting." He nodded. "It's starting." She paused. "You know they're coming for you again. Let them. You're not scared?" Elijah looked out the window at the rising sun. "No," he said. "I'm finally free." But even as the sun rose, miles away, behind iron gates and barbed wire, something darker was being born. A black file dropped onto a polished desk. Inside, photos of Elijah, Naomi, Patrice, Kyle, and Malik. A cold voice on the phone whispered, If we can't kill the symbol, we'll break the soul. And the man holding the file simply nodded, smiling. The photo of Malik Freeman, the innocent grandson of the most feared U.S. Army general, rested at the top of a manila folder labeled Soft Targets. A silent war had begun, not one fought with bombs or bullets, but with fear, blackmail, and shadows. Grayson had lost the vault. The country had seen the truth. But the people behind Black Phoenix hadn't vanished. They'd only gone deeper. And now, they were going after the people Elijah loved most. Patrice stood outside the courtroom, holding Malik's hand. He was dressed in his Sunday best, navy blazer, khakis, and the small American flag pin Elijah had given him the day he turned 6. "Are you nervous, Mommy?" Malik asked. She gave him a soft smile. "A little, but I've seen worse." Across the street, media trucks lined the block. Journalists and cameras waited to catch a glimpse of the woman who had helped expose the nation's darkest secret. Naomi approached them with Kyle, both dressed in dark suits, earpieces tucked in. "You're clear to enter," Naomi said. "But once you're inside, keep Malik close." Patrice nodded. "Are we expecting trouble?" Kyle didn't answer at first. Then he glanced across the street at a parked sedan with tinted windows. "We've seen the same car at 3 different locations. No plates. No movement. But it's watching." Patrice's eyes narrowed. She looked down at Malik. "We stay together. No matter what." They crossed the street and entered the federal courthouse under heavy security. Elijah would be testifying soon. But for now, all eyes were on Patrice. She was about to face a congressional subcommittee, not just to support Elijah, but to expose the men who had tried to silence him. As they walked down the hallway, a woman stepped out from behind a pillar. She wore a sharp red blazer and carried a clipboard. "Miss Freeman?" Patrice stopped. "Yes." The woman smiled. "My name is Agent Lauren Vale. Homeland Security. We've received intel that your family may be in danger." Kyle stepped forward. "We've got it covered." But the woman's smile didn't falter. "I'm afraid it's more serious than that. They're planning a coordinated attack. And you," she looked down at Malik, "may be the leverage they want." Patrice's stomach dropped. Naomi's eyes narrowed. "You got a name? A badge?" The woman reached into her pocket, slowly, and pulled out an official badge. "Homeland, all right." But not one Naomi recognized. Patrice took a step back, instinct rising. But before anyone could speak again, bang! Gunshots rang out from the other end of the hallway. Screams echoed. Officers shouted, "Get down." The woman in red instantly shoved Patrice hard against the wall. Naomi lunged, but the woman was already gone, vanishing into the chaos. Kyle drew his weapon, scanning the crowd. "It's a diversion." Patrice clutched Malik to her chest, heart pounding. Naomi cursed under her breath. They tried to grab him. Right here. In a courthouse. More agents came running down the hallway. "Lock this floor down. Nobody in or out." Inside the courtroom, Elijah heard the commotion. He stood, fists clenched, ignoring the judge's command to sit down. "Where's my family?" Kyle's voice came through his earpiece. "They're safe. Barely. But you've just started a fire we can't put out." 2 hours later, back at the safe house, Patrice paced the living room. Malik was asleep on the couch, curled up with Naomi's jacket. "They came for him," Patrice whispered. "My son." Elijah sat nearby, his arms still in a sling, a fresh bandage over the stitches at his temple. "That's what they do," he said. "They can't beak you in the light, so they crawl into the dark." Patrice stopped pacing. "So what do we do?" Kyle closed the blinds. "We make it hurt to crawl." He dropped a laptop onto the table. On screen was a list of locations, names, private contractors, shell companies. "We found something in the Sandglass data. A secondary network. Operates out of a compound in Northern Virginia. They're called Red Dagger. Mostly ex-CIA, Black Ops. Dirty as hell. And they're the ones running operations against you now." Naomi leaned in. "We take them down. We cut the head off the snake." Elijah's voice was low. "Then let's not waste time." But Kyle hesitated. "It's not that simple. The compound's protected by a private army. And even if we get in, they've got protocols. Self-erasing drives. Time to lay bombs. If we hit them, we've got one shot to grab it all before they burn everything." Patrice didn't flinch. "So we hit them hard. And we don't miss." Naomi looked at Elijah. "You're the only one who knows how to dismantle their system. Can you do it?" Elijah stared at the map. His jaw clenched. Then he stood. "Get me a team. I'll get us through the gates." 3 nights later, Under cover of darkness, a convoy of blacked-out SUVs rolled through the back roads of Fairfax County. Inside were the people they tried to erase. Elijah, Naomi, Patrice, Kyle, and 10 former operatives who had served under Elijah overseas. Men and women who owed him their lives and had come out of hiding for one last mission. They were ghosts, all of them. But tonight, they'd become a storm. The Red Dagger compound sat behind razor wire, infrared cameras, and steel gates. It looked like a tech firm on the surface. Clean, quiet, professional. But underground, it was something else entirely. Torture rooms, black servers, surveillance grids tied to every major city. And in the heart of it all, Grayson himself. He watched the monitors, sipping black coffee, as a warning light blinked. Unidentified heat signatures. Sector 6. He leaned forward. They're here. An aide turned. Do we launch the purge? Grayson smiled thinly. Not yet. I want him to see it first. The gate exploded inward with a flash of light and thunder. Elijah led the charge. Gunfire erupted. Guards fell. Naomi and Kyle moved like a unit, clearing rooms. Patrice ducked under a motion sensor, her silencer whispering death as she took down 2 sentries. Elijah reached the server room, planted a breach charge on the vault. Boom. Inside, rack after rack of black drives. Patrice plugged in a decryptor key and began downloading files. Then Elijah heard something. A voice through the wall-mounted speakers. Welcome back, General. Grayson's voice. Elijah's fist clenched. Grayson continued. You think this ends with me? You think a handful of downloads and a courtroom speech fix centuries of control? He laughed. You're a relic, Elijah. A ghost. And you know what happens to ghosts? They fade. Elijah looked straight into the camera. No, they haunt. Suddenly, the walls lit red. Purge initiated. Naomi shouted. They're wiping everything. The servers began to spark, one by one. But before the final rack could fry, Patrice yanked the last drive free and shoved it into her pack. Kyle fired his last round, covering their escape. Elijah, we gotta move. As they ran, a squad of black-armored guards appeared at the far end of the corridor. Elijah turned and smiled. Go, Patrice screamed, and oh. He stepped forward, pulling the pin on his last EMP grenade. This is from Malik. He tossed it. The explosion of light and static fried every camera, every weapon, every electronic system in a 200-foot radius. The guards screamed as their visors went black, and Elijah vanished into the smoke. 20 minutes later, the team reassembled in the woods a mile away. Helicopter inbound. Extraction clean. But Elijah wasn't there. Patrice stood silently, staring into the trees. Naomi stepped beside her. He bought us time. Got the data. Kyle approached, holding the drive. This is everything. It's enough to bring down half the shadow ops in this country. Patrice nodded slowly, then looked at Malik's photo in her pocket. But just as the chopper blades began to whir in the distance, a figure stumbled out of the smoke. Elijah, bleeding, burned, but alive. Again, Patrice ran to him. He fell into her arms. She held him tight. You crazy old man, she whispered. You don't get to leave us yet. But even as the tears streamed down her face, a new shadow appeared behind them. A sniper, hidden, waiting. A red dot appeared on Elijah's chest, and Patrice saw it just in time. She dove forward. Crack. The gunshot echoed through the night. Patrice hit the ground hard, her body twisting midair as the bullet slammed into her shoulder. Blood sprayed across the damp forest floor. Elijah spun around, eyes wide with horror. Patrice. The team scattered instantly, Naomi ducking behind a tree, Kyle raising his rifle and unleashing a hail of return fire into the trees above. Sniper. 2 o'clock. Up in the ridge. Another shot cracked through the branches, barely missing Naomi's head. The sound of helicopter blades grew louder. Their evac was seconds away, but Patrice wasn't moving. Elijah dropped beside her, pressing both hands to the wound. Blood oozed through his fingers. No, no, stay with me, he whispered, his voice shaking. Patrice's eyes fluttered. Her lips moved. He was aiming at you. I know, he said. I know. She smiled faintly. Still crazy. And then her eyes rolled back. Elijah, Naomi shouted. We have to move, now. Elijah scooped Patrice up in his arms and ran, his breath ragged, pain screaming through every limb. Kyle covered the rear, bullets zipping past his ears. The team burst into the small clearing just as the helicopter touched down, wind whipping the grass flat. Elijah climbed aboard with Patrice in his arms. Naomi slammed the door shut. Kyle banged on the cockpit wall. Go, go. The chopper lifted, rising fast, as more shots rang out from the forest. Below them, masked figures emerged in the darkness, too late to stop the escape. Inside, Naomi ripped open a med kit and began treating Patrice's wound. She's stable, she said, panting. But barely. Elijah sat beside her, jaw clenched, his hand never leaving hers. She took a bullet for me, he whispered. She saved you, Naomi said. No, he replied, looking out into the black sky. She saved everything. Back in Washington, the storm had finally arrived. The files Patrice pulled from Red Dagger were authenticated within hours. News anchors went live with breaking reports. Black Phoenix tied to domestic assassinations, foreign coups. Military tribunals announced as secrets pour out. Freeman team hailed as national whistleblowers. Capitol Hill was in chaos. Arrests were being made. And a special session of Congress was scheduled in less than 48 hours. The star witness? General Elijah Freeman. But while the nation watched in suspense, another message slipped quietly into encrypted channels, seen only by a few in the deepest parts of the government. A directive, short and deadly. Terminate Elijah Freeman. Before the hearing. It was early morning when Elijah visited the hospital again. Patrice lay in a white bed, a tangle of 4 lines and machines at her side. Her shoulder was wrapped tight, her breathing slow but steady. Malik sat beside her, holding her hand with both of his. He looked up when Elijah entered. She's still asleep, he whispered. Elijah placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. You're strong, just like her. Malik nodded. I'm going to be a soldier. Like you. Elijah swallowed hard, then smiled. You already are. He sat down, watching Patrice rest, thinking of everything they had survived, how they had gone from fugitives to freedom fighters. But even now, they weren't safe. Grayson was still out there, bleeding, hiding, cornered, but not dead, and Elijah knew exactly what he'd do next. That evening, Naomi and Kyle met with a pair of U.S. Marshals in a secure government office. We'll be moving Freeman under full armored escort to the Capitol tomorrow, one marshal said. 6-vehicle convoy. Air cover. Naomi wasn't satisfied. You don't understand who you're dealing with, she said. Grayson doesn't care how public this is. He's going to try something. Kyle added. And if you underestimate him, people will die. The marshal sighed. It's the most protected witness move in D.C. history. Naomi leaned in. Make it bulletproof. Because if Elijah doesn't testify tomorrow, none of this matters. That night, Elijah stood alone in the hotel's penthouse suite, staring out over the city. He could see the Capitol building in the distance, lit up like a lighthouse, a symbol of justice. But he knew better than most how hollow symbols could be. Behind him, Naomi stepped in quietly. You should get some rest. He nodded, but didn't move. They tried to erase me, he said. Erase my name, my life, my family. They failed, Naomi said. Elijah turned, his face hard but tired. They won't stop. No, she agreed. But tomorrow, they lose everything. A knock at the door cut through the moment. Kyle opened it. A man stood in the hall. Mid-50s. Silver hair. Military posture. Elijah Freeman, he said. Elijah stepped forward, instantly alert. The man held out a badge. Special Agent Thomas Reeve. Secret Service. I'm here to lead your transfer to Capitol Hill tomorrow morning. But Elijah didn't reach for the badge. His eyes narrowed. There was something off. Reeve smiled too easily. Elijah took a step closer, silent, and saw it. The faintest shadow of a tattoo, just beneath the collar. A snake coiled around a dagger. Red Dagger. It was a trap. Elijah moved. Naomi screamed. Too late. Reeve lunged, pulling a silenced pistol from his coat. Elijah grabbed his wrist mid-swing, the 2 men crashing into the window. The glass shattered. They tumbled through. Elijah catching the edge of the window frame with one hand, Reeve's body hanging below him. Elijah's grip trembled. Reeve grinned. Let go and you live. Save me, and you die. Elijah looked down. Then slowly, coldly, he let go. Reeve's scream faded into the wind. Elijah pulled himself back into the room, gasping. Kyle ran in. What the hell happened? Naomi looked out the broken window, jaw tight. They're getting desperate. Elijah stood, blood on his hands. No. he said, eyes locked on the Capitol dome glowing in the distance. They're getting sloppy. The next morning, the sun rose over Washington like a beacon. Streets were shut down. News crews packed sidewalks. Protesters and supporters alike filled the streets with banners and chants. Justice for Freeman. In the shadow state. Inside a secured SUV, Elijah adjusted the collar of his uniform. It had been a long time since he'd worn his stars. Naomi sat across from him. Kyle drove. You ready? She asked. He looked out the window at the cheering crowd, then nodded. For them. Behind them, an identical SUV followed. Inside, two men dressed like marshals. But in their pockets, silencers, poison vials, and a detonator rigged to blow half the convoy sky high. One pressed his earpiece. Target confirmed. Detonation at Capitol steps. But what they didn't know? Naomi had already switched the convoy route. And in their earpieces, static, then silence. The killers reached for their detonator, only to find it missing. Held by Kyle in the lead vehicle. He pressed the switch. Their SUV exploded mid-street, fire and glass raining across the plaza. Panic erupted, but Elijah's vehicle kept moving, escorted now by police, military, and citizens alike. As the dust settled, Elijah Freeman stepped out of the SUV at the Capitol steps. The nation watched. His enemies burned. And for the first time in decades, he walked freely into the halls of power. To speak the truth, the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol had never been so silent. Cameras lined every wall. Security stood shoulder to shoulder. Senators and congressmen, some powerful, some now terrified, filled their seats. At the center stood one man, General Elijah Freeman. The black jacket of his uniform was pressed and clean, but the weight he carried was heavier than any metal pin to his chest. He stepped up to the mic, facing the room, facing the nation. No teleprompter, no lawyer at his side, just truth. My name is Elijah Freeman, he began. I served this country for 35 years, led men and women into battle, bled for our flag, buried brothers under it. He paused, then let the anger rise just beneath the surface. And I was erased, not by an enemy overseas, but by cowards in suits, men with power who feared the truth I carried. The room shifted uncomfortably. A few looked at each other. Some glanced at the exits. He continued. Sandglass, Black Phoenix, Red Dagger. These names should haunt you. They funded wars for profit, silenced civilians, killed American citizens. A gasp rippled through the room. I know, because I was ordered to help build the machine. And when I refused, they came after me, framed me, tried to destroy my family. He held up a small object. The drive Patrice had pulled from the compound. This holds the receipts, the orders, the names. Then he did something unexpected. He looked into the camera, not at Congress, but at the people watching at home. This country was built on the backs of people like me. Black, old, forgotten. We've served. We've endured. We've obeyed. But now we lead. A long pause. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, slowly, a young black congresswoman stood and began to clap. Others followed, until the entire chamber rose in a standing ovation. Not just for Elijah, but for the justice long overdue. By evening, the world had changed. Arrests rippled through the Pentagon, the CIA, even the private halls of billionaires who had lived untouchable for decades. Black Phoenix was dissolved. The Red Dagger compound burned to the ground, accidentally, according to officials. And a new federal act passed within 72 hours, the Freeman Accountability Act, a landmark law mandating public oversight of all covert operations. Elijah refused the offer to join the president's cabinet. He said one war was enough. In a small neighborhood outside D.C., spring had arrived. Flowers bloomed. Kids biked through the streets. Inside a quiet home, Patrice stood in her backyard garden, her shoulders still healing. Malik ran around chasing a soccer ball, his laugh echoing down the fence line. Elijah sat in a rocking chair nearby, sipping sweet tea, watching them both. You ever think it'd end like this? Patrice asked him, pulling weeds. He smirked. Which part? Getting slapped in court? Or almost shot 22 times? She laughed. You kept count. He shrugged. Soldier's habit. She walked over and handed him a small envelope. What's this? He asked. She nodded toward Malik. He wrote you something. Elijah opened it. Inside was a crayon drawing. Elijah, in full general's uniform, standing tall next to Malik. also in uniform, with a big gold star above their heads, and the words, "My hero, General Grandpa." Elijah's eyes misted. He cleared his throat, folding the drawing and placing it gently in his pocket. "He's going to be better than both of us," he said. Patrice nodded. "That's the goal." Naomi pulled into the driveway then, stepping out of her car with sunglasses and a file tucked under her arm. "You guys see the news?" Kyle followed behind, holding coffee. "They just froze Grayson's offshore accounts. He's got nothing left but a Swiss passport and a bounty." Patrice smirked. "Good." Naomi tossed the file onto the porch table. "By the way, Elijah, you've got requests to speak at West Point, Harvard, and CNN." He raised an eyebrow. "And?" Naomi grinned. "You want to tell them no, or should I?" Elijah chuckled. "I'll think about it. After I finish this tea." The group laughed, the sun warm on their faces. And for the first time in a long time, there was peace. Real peace. Earned. Fought for. Not handed down. Not negotiated. But won. Malik ran up, holding a soccer ball. "Grandpa, want to play?" Elijah stood up, stretching his old bones. "Just don't expect me to go easy on you," he said. Patrice watched them run off into the yard, then closed her eyes, breathed in, and smiled. The world hadn't changed overnight, but it had started. And she, just a black woman they tried to erase, had helped make it happen. No more running. No more hiding. They were free. Finally.